So, as we celebrate Worldwide Communion and as we honor and remember Francis today, there probably isn't a better story or spirit to teach us about communion. Here's some words of St. Francis of Assisi. I think God might be a little prejudiced. For once, God asked me to join God on a walk through this world, and we gazed into every heart. And I noticed God lingered a bit longer before any face that was weeping and before any eyes that were laughing. And sometimes when we passed a soul in worship, God too would kneel down. I have come to learn God adores creation. In the spirit of St. Francis, I bid you peace. Please take a long, deep breath. Peace. In the words of Francis, I have come to learn God adores creation. Now look around you. Perhaps you only see my face at the moment, but especially those of you who have other beloveds in the room or house with you. Take a very good look at this spectacular community gathering online. If you look very closely, you will see in one another a breathtakingly beautiful bouquet of awe-inspiring delight. Some might even call it Holy Communion. Aren't you lovely? Made from love? Gathered around this makeshift Zoom altar of ours, the divine spirit will indeed work in, with, and through each one of us to touch, love, strengthen, and adore us. In, with, and through is a way some theology describes the way in which the divine spirit comes to us in the elements of Holy Communion. You know that we live and move and have our being in the divine presence, and that they live and breathe in, with, through, and beyond us. I say this not only to remind all of you, but to remind myself that the divine spirit is not some far off distant being who lives up there or out there somewhere. The divine spirit is here, right here, all around us, in us and beyond us, just as surely as we are in them. So on this wonderful day in the season of creation, it is so very appropriate for us to turn our attention to beautiful St. Francis of Assisi, who reminds us that all creation is divine. Francis was born into a wealthy merchant family and spent his young life striving to become a knight by actively participating in the competition between Italian cities to dominate the emerging capitalist system. Francis learned, like each one of us must, that acquiring things, amassing wealth, and competing for power cannot ever bring us peace. So Francis renounced things, gave up his wealth and powerful position in Italian society, and walked away from the competitive capitalist system. He even went so far as to challenge the church's teachings about how to be a Christian. For centuries, the church taught that the best way, the truest way to be a Christian in the world was to follow the example of the early followers of the way that we find in the book of Acts. The community of believers was of one mind and one heart. None of them claimed anything as their own. Rather, everything was held in common. The apostles continued to testify with great power to the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and they were given great respect. Nor was anyone needy among them, for those who owned property or houses would sell them and give the money to the apostles. It was then distributed to any members who might be in need. We've all heard the story of the early church that practiced this communal way of being, where each person was cared for according to their needs. But in the 17th century, Francis saw that the church had leaned far too heavily upon this part, or the part of this communal equation where the apostles continued to testify with great power to the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and they were given great respect. Nor was anyone needy among them, for those who owned property or houses would sell them and give the money to the apostles. As the heirs to the apostles, the church hierarchy gathered wealth and power to itself. Francis challenged the power of the church, not by pointing to the acts of the apostles, but to the Gospels themselves. Francis insisted that following Jesus meant that the church could not follow two masters. Following Jesus meant forsaking wealth and power and taking up service. In the words of storyteller Matthew, Jesus apparently insisted, "This is why I tell you not to worry about your livelihood, what you are to eat or drink or use for clothing. Isn't life more than just food? Isn't the body more than just clothes? Look at the birds of the sky. They do not sow or reap. They gather nothing into barns, yet the divine presence feeds them. Aren't you more important than they? Which of you, by worrying, can add a moment to your lifespan? And why be anxious about clothing? Learn a lesson from the way the wildflowers grow. They don't work, they don't spin. Yet I tell you, not even Solomon in full splendor was arrayed like one of these." Inspired by the Gospels, Francis, who had been a cloth merchant, gave up his fine clothes and put on a simple homespun brown garment. The symbolism reflected Francis' journey into creation, where he encountered the beauty of creation, and in that beauty came to know the divine. Through his relationship with creation, Francis grew in relationship to the Creator. Nothing in all of creation was to be trivialized, simply because everything in creation comes as pure gift from the Creator. Indeed, our very existence is miraculous beyond compare. The very fact that we exist at all is pure gift. More and more, in the beauty of the divine's creation, Francis saw the love that is divine. That love was also reflected in every part of creation, which was cast aside by the world. Nowhere was this more evident to Francis than in the people the world cast aside, in the poor, infirm, outcast, and enemies. Francis saw the beauty of creatures created, and by the love that is the divine gift, and as creations of divine love, even these powerless, poor, outcasts, and enemies were also loved by the Creator. Much has been written about the Church's disapproval of the ways of St. Francis. Suffice it to say that Francis was himself cast out as a madman. I mean, you just can't give up everything and follow Jesus. That's far too radical. Yet the power of his way of being in the world flourished and continues to inspire a rare few to follow Jesus by renouncing wealth and power and taking up a life of service to the poor and marginal. But what are we, wealthy and powerful people that many of us are, to make of Francis? Well, I think if the truth be told, most of us still think the ways of Francis are far too radical for us. I think that's why, for the most part, the image of Francis has in popular imagination been relegated to that of a garden gnome. You know, that rather gray and colorless character standing with a bird in hand and a dog at his feet. Today, all over the world, churches are celebrating the feast of St. Francis. In better times, this is especially done by offering services of the blessing of animals. But as lovely as images of people taking their pets to church for a blessing are, and you can be sure that is one of my favorite services, I can't help wondering how much more the world might benefit if we looked beyond our pampered pets and began to see what Francis saw in the powerless, poor, outcast, and even and maybe especially in our enemies. Every week, I hope, within our beautiful Esquimalt United Church community, we are encouraged to go and be love in the world. Francis instructs us how to be love in the world. He challenges us to look at the Gospels and see Jesus forsaking wealth and power and caring for the least and lost. He challenges us to be love by remembering that we are made of love, for love, even as we are beloved by the divine, who is love itself. As we learn to love the least of these, we love our Creator who is love. And our very existence is a gift of love. So, dear siblings, do not worry about your livelihood, for life is more precious than this. Learn a lesson from the way the wildflowers grow. Look around at one another, and you will see such a beautiful bouquet given as pure gift from love itself. Let us be love in the world by loving all that our Creator loves. In loving all whom they love, we will find our peace. This is our challenge. This is our calling to follow Jesus, to become love in the world. In this we shall find peace. Let it be so, dear friends. Let it be so. This is part of our story.